What would it be like if Spain's national team didn't make it to the biggest football festival on the planet? Just hearing that sounds ridiculous. But it could actually happen. Imagine the 2026 World Cup, the very first with as many as 48 teams, taking place without the reigning European champions, who also lifted the trophy back in 2010. At this point, many people might say this sounds absurd, because how could a powerhouse like Spain possibly perform so poorly that they failed to qualify? But the issue here is very different, directly tied to politics and ongoing conflicts. The World Cup, the biggest football tournament on the planet, has always been seen as a festival of unity, where 32, or now 48 nations, come together to compete in the spirit of sportsmanship. Yet never before has the build-up to the 2026 World Cup been overshadowed by such a heavy cloud. For the first time, the tournament will be co-hosted by 3 nations, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, promising an unprecedented global reach. But the news that Spain, the reigning European champions and one of the top contenders for the title, might withdraw in protest against Israel has shaken the entire football world. Having won both of their opening qualifying matches and widely regarded by experts as strong favorites, Spain's participation at the World Cup seems almost guaranteed. But ironically, it's politics, not performance, that could become the biggest barrier to La Roja's presence at the tournament where they're expected to shine. The conflict in Gaza since October 2023 has had catastrophic consequences. Following Hamas's attack, which left over 1,200 people dead and hundreds taken hostage, Israel launched a large-scale retaliation. According to figures provided by Gaza's health ministry and considered credible by the United Nations, nearly 65,000 Palestinians have been killed to date. The international community remains deeply divided, while many Western countries maintain ties with Israel. Spain has emerged as one of the loudest voices calling for Israel's exclusion from international sports, similar to how Russia was sanctioned after invading Ukraine in 2022. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has insisted that Israel cannot continue to use international platforms to whitewash its image. His stance has been backed by senior government officials, with spokesperson Pachi Lopez even suggesting that Parliament could vote to officially boycott the World Cup if Israel qualifies. Currently, Israel sits third in their qualifying group in Europe and still has a strong chance of securing a direct spot and avoiding the playoffs. Should they succeed, Spain's withdrawal would no longer be an unrealistic scenario. This could spark an unprecedented diplomatic and sporting crisis. Spain is not only a football powerhouse but also a founding member of UEFA with significant influence in the European Union. If they take the lead, other nations, some of which have already threatened to boycott Eurovision 2025 if Israel participates, could follow suit. On the other hand, FIFA has long upheld the principle of keeping politics out of football, strictly prohibiting government interference in national federations. If Spain does withdraw under political pressure, they risk severe sanctions, potentially including bans from international competitions. This puts the Spanish Football Federation, RFEF, in an impossible dilemma. Many optimists argue that sports should stay clear of conflicts. But history has shown the opposite. In 1966, North Korea was banned from international competition for political reasons. More recently, Russia was excluded from the 2022 World Cup and Euro 2024 after invading Ukraine. Thus, if Spain insists on a boycott, they would merely be following a precedent already set by the global community. The key difference this time is that Spain's government is actively applying pressure to isolate Israel. This shows that football has never, and perhaps will never, be separate from political and social contexts. The irony is that on the pitch, Spain is currently thriving. Under Luis de la Fuente, the new generation led by Pedri, Gavi, and Lamine Yamal has brought La Roja back to the top. Their Euro 2024 triumph was clear proof of a young, ambitious squad's strength. Yet instead of discussing their World Cup prospects, the international press is now questioning whether Spain will even set foot in the US, Mexico, and Canada. This uncertainty will undoubtedly affect the players, who only want to perform on the field but are being dragged into a political storm beyond their control. Public sentiment in Spain is also increasingly anti-Israel. Protests during the Vuelta, Spain's biggest cycling event, saw thousands block the race to demonstrate against Israel Premier Tech. The sight of Palestinian flags waving in Madrid highlighted how deeply this issue has penetrated Spanish society. Given this atmosphere, the government's tough stance on Israel has significant public support. However, there are concerns that football should not be weaponized for politics, and a World Cup boycott would only hurt players and fans. While Spain is the first major national team to openly raise the possibility of boycotting the 2026 World Cup if Israel qualifies, they are not alone on the international stage. In the Middle East, federations from Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE have already written to FIFA and UEFA, demanding Israel's suspension from global competitions. This proves the wave of opposition extends beyond politics, seeping directly into sports, which were once seen as neutral ground. Indonesia already set a precedent in 2023 when FIFA stripped the country of hosting rights for the U20 World Cup after it refused to accept Israel's participation. That decision shocked fans worldwide but underscored the reality that sports cannot be entirely separated from politics and human rights. Even outside of football, countries like Ireland, Slovenia, Iceland, and the Netherlands have declared they would boycott Eurovision 2026 if Israel participates. Though this is in the cultural sphere, not sports, the message is loud and clear: opposition to Israel is spreading beyond politics alone. In this context, Spain could act as the spark, if they truly withdraw from the World Cup. It's not far-fetched to imagine other countries following suit. Should Spain actually miss the 2026 World Cup, the repercussions would be vast and felt across many levels. First and foremost, the players would pay the highest price. A new golden generation of Spanish football would lose the chance to showcase their talent on the world's biggest stage. For them, the World Cup is more than a tournament, it's a dream, a legacy, and a career-defining moment. Losing it would leave an unfillable void in their short professional lives. Fans, too, would suffer greatly. After waiting more than a decade to see La Roja return to the top, they had hoped 2026 would be the perfect time for glory. If the team withdraws, millions of supporters would feel betrayed and devastated as their national pride is sacrificed for politics. For FIFA, the absence of Spain, one of the world's top teams and the reigning European champions, would inevitably reduce the commercial appeal and broadcasting value of the tournament. A World Cup without La Roja would lack the same competitiveness and charm, especially when FIFA has marketed 2026 as the grandest event in sports history with 48 teams. Diplomatically, Spain's withdrawal could trigger a domino effect, leading to a global sports political crisis. Instead of being remembered as a football festival, the 2026 World Cup might be overshadowed by disputes and divisions. In other words, Spain's decision would not only impact their own football but could also redefine how the world views the relationship between sports, politics, and human rights in the modern era. Spain now faces a historic decision. If Israel qualifies, they must choose between defending the purity of sports or prioritizing political and human rights values. Either choice carries profound consequences. Should they withdraw, Spain might ignite a wave of international boycotts, turning the 2026 World Cup into the most controversial tournament in history. If they participate, they would face domestic backlash and accusations of betraying the very principles their government promotes. The question of whether La Roja will play at the 2026 World Cup is no longer about football, it is a test of the intersection between sport, politics, and morality. Whatever choice is made, it will leave a lasting mark on World Cup history. For football lovers who support Spain, the best-case scenario would be simple: that Israel fails to qualify. That outcome may well depend on Italy, Spain's opponent in the Euro 2012 final. If Italy can win all their remaining qualifiers, that goal is within reach. Because a World Cup without Spain, without Lamine Yamal, is almost unimaginable.